right, now we're on. All right. So I've got a lead in here that's going to get us started, so if you miss the front end, the rest of the lesson won't make quite as much sense. So should I aim it at that or back there? Back here. Okay. Turn it on. Makes it work better. All right. So I wouldn't probably expect most of you to know who this guy is. Does anybody know who this is? I wouldn't think so. I didn't know who it was either until I saw this on social media and I started reading the story. This guy's name is Joshua Bell. Joshua Bell was born in Bloomington, Indiana to Shirley Bell, a therapist, and Alan Bell, a psychologist and a professor at Indiana University. At the age of 4, his mother discovered that he had taken rubber bands from around the house and he had tied them around his dresser drawer, and he was trying to pluck those rubber bands to play along with as his mother played the piano in the living room. And when she discovered that, they thought that maybe he had an affinity or a talent that was untapped, and they thought that they would maybe pick an instrument for him to wind up playing. And the instrument they wind up choosing is the violin. So his parents got him a scale-sized violin, and when he was 5 years old, he started lessons. He took so well to the instrument that by age 14, he appeared as a soloist with the Philadelphia Orchestra. And by age 17, Bell made his first appearance at Carnegie Hall. I don't know much about the violin or this type of music, but I think if you're playing Carnegie Hall, that's pretty talented. So he really took to the instrument. His talent grew and his knowledge grew. He's gone on to write music for many movies, TV, concert pieces. He travels the world playing many venues. Currently, Joshua Bell is 56 years old, and his net worth is $15 million. The violin he's playing, you can see it a little bit better in this picture, is a Stradivarius, and I think most of us, even though we don't know what these instruments are, understand what a Stradivarius is. It's a very expensive instrument, very well made, highly sought after instrument. And this particular violin was made in 1713. So it's a very old instrument, and it was made during what's called the Stradivari Golden Era. And apparently some really good violins came out of that area, and they're very well sought after. This violin is valued at between $3.5 and $4 million that he's playing here in this picture. And before Bell acquired this violin, it was owned by other people, and it was been stolen twice since the violin has been in existence. And when the violin was recovered the last time, Joshua Bell heard about it being recovered, and he went and made a deal to buy this violin somewhere between $3.5 and $4 million and bought it for himself. You can see in this picture, and it's a grainy picture because it's a security camera footage that you can see, but this is Joshua Bell in a New York subway playing this violin. And you can see people are just walking past him. In this picture, a lady has stopped to witness him play, and you can see him playing here by the trash cans, and this one woman has stopped, and she's standing there watching him play. He played for about 45 minutes. A handful of people stopped, a couple clapped, and he raised about $30 in tips. So what's the point? People are just walking past Joshua Bell, who is a world-renowned violinist, playing a violin that's worth a little less than $4 million. He's playing one of the most complicated pieces ever written to be played on a violin, and they're so busy focused on their everyday, ordinary routine that they haven't taken the time to recognize that they're walking past and ignoring something very, very special. Just 2 days before this happened, Bell sold out a Boston concert hall where the average ticket price was $100 a ticket. That was the average price. Some of them were a little less, some of them were more. And they were walking past him here in the subway and could have heard it for free. This experiment that he decided to do to see what would happen proves that in an ordinary environment, the extraordinary is so often overlooked. I'll say that again. In an ordinary environment, the extraordinary is so often overlooked. And think about this. Joshua Bell has a knowledge. See the next slide. Joshua Bell has a knowledge and skill of this instrument is far beyond what most could ever hope to obtain. But most of you sitting here this morning have a biblical knowledge that is far greater than the majority of people that you come in contact on a daily basis. The violin that Joshua Bell is playing is of great value more money than most of us could ever imagine being able to see or experience in a lifetime. With the Bible that you hold in your hand, the written Word of God is infinitely more valuable than the violin that he holds in his hand. If we couldn't have the Bible and we couldn't hold that Bible in our hand, $4 million that's not even something you would even think about. If that's the only way that you could have salvation, you couldn't have it. It wouldn't be a fair trade. Think about this also. How many times have you tried to share God's Word with people and they've put absolutely no value on it? And just like they were walking past Joshua Bell in this New York subway, they're not interested in hearing what you want to teach them. They won't take the time out of their ordinary to hear about the extraordinary. Should have advanced the slide. So here's our next one. Here's some things we're going to talk about today. You've got to know the value of the message and the knowledge that you have. Don't discount the knowledge that you have. Sometimes we feel like as members that we know enough to help ourselves, but we don't know enough to help other people. You'd be surprised at how much more you know than a lot of the people that you come in contact with on a daily basis. Know the importance of the command that you're given by God, the commission that you're given by God to teach others. And you need to be able to recognize when they don't recognize how extraordinary the message is. So our text this morning, we're going to go look at Matthew 10. We're going to start reading through that. That's where we're going to spend most of our time, in Matthew 10. What's happening here in Matthew 10, and Jesus has called the 12 disciples together, and he's going to send them out on what's commonly called the limited commission. He's going to give them very specific instructions, and we're going to look at these instructions, how they compare to us in our life, and how we can look at that, how it can help us, or knowledge that we should take from this to help us in our day-to-day. We'll start out in verse 1. It says that when he had called his 12 disciples to him, he gave them power over unclean spirits to cast them out and heal all kinds of sickness and all kinds of disease. Now the names of the 12 apostles are these. First Simon, who is called Peter, and Andrew his brother, James the son of Zebedee, and John his brother, Philip and Bartholomew, Thomas and Matthew the tax collector. And I still think it's unfortunate that Matthew can never be called Matthew without saying, well, he's the tax collector. So James the son of Alphaeus, and Levius, whose surname is Thaddeus, Simon the Canaanite, and Judas Iscariot, who betrayed him. So we're told who is here. We're told that Jesus called the 12 disciples together, and he's about to issue them not the Great Commission, but the limited commission. So keep that in mind. So going on to verse 5, he says, These 12 Jesus sent out and commanded them, saying, Do not go into the way of the Gentiles, and do not enter a city of the Samaritans, but go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel, and as you go, preach, saying, The kingdom of heaven is at hand. And he tells them in 8, he says, Heal the sick, cleanse the lepers, raise the dead, and cast out demons. Freely you have received, freely you give. Provide neither gold, nor silver, nor copper in your money belts, nor bag for your journey, nor 2 tunics, nor sandals, nor staffs, for a worker is worthy of his hire. So, we go back through this and we start to break it down, and we look at, he's going to send these 12 out, and he tells them something right away. He said, Don't go in the way of the Gentiles, or don't enter the city of the Samaritans. Why would he tell them not to go to the Gentiles or the Samaritans? That's right.
It's a limited commission.
Yeah, it is a limited commission. It's not the major one, it's a limited one. So I brought paper notes in case this thing started skipping on me again. It is. I'm going to have to get my resident in-house technology guy to look at why it's doing this. I downloaded Microsoft 360, not to get off into all that, but it wants to connect to the Wi-Fi, and it's just a subscription, and you're paying for it. And they like to keep you within that subscription, but the thing refreshes every once in a while. I don't know why it does that. So I brought paper notes this time to be a little more prepared. When it does it, it jumps to the top of the page, and I have to scroll back. So really throws a wrench in things. So yes, that's true. That's true that it wasn't their time yet, and that was very specific. Think about this also. If you compare the two groups to the Jews, now they're going to teach the Jews, and they're going to say that the kingdom of heaven is at hand, and their main focus on this trip. And he said, don't go to the Gentiles and don't go to the Samaritans. But if you look at how the two groups were prepared, between the three groups, the Jews would have been looking for the kingdom, and the Samaritans and the Gentiles would not. They would not be looking for the kingdom, so the ability to be able to teach them, to teach the Jews versus the Samaritans and Gentiles, would be greater and it would be easier. And the Jews were the most prepared to hear this teaching at the time. They wouldn't be as prepared as the Samaritans. And also the Great Commission was not yet, because Christ had not been crucified. The Great Commission comes in Matthew 28, 18 and 20, and it also comes in Acts 1 and 8, when they're reminded of this Great Commission whenever the early church is about to be established and they're told to go out and teach everyone. So one thing to remember is it was not their time. It was not what they were sent out to do at this point. And they were not as prepared to hear this as what the Jews were prepared to do. And also Christ knew that there was a limited amount of time that they had to go out and spread the word about this kingdom that was coming. They didn't have time to teach everybody. They had time to teach the ones that were most ready for it. As Christians, we have a desire to teach those around us, and we should start to evaluate those who are the most prepared or that might be able to hear the message. And we should, as Christians, pick the easiest target first. Now, I'm not saying that you decide for someone that they have or don't have the ability to hear the gospel, or that it's right for them to be able to hear the gospel. You don't do that, but you mention a study with them, or you mention it to them. And if they're going to want to walk past you or not hear it, or they're not interested, you can't spend a lot of undue time on individuals that are not interested when there are other individuals that would be interested. There are other individuals that would be more prepared or at a different place in life, and that's something that we as Christians should try to discern and think about as we go about and we try to spread the gospel. If there are people in your life that would be easier to convert, the harder to convert ones might notice that you're studying with them or you're making a difference in their lives, and they might become curious and they might be more open to a study. So I ask you this question. I want you to think for just a moment. I want you to imagine the person or the people that I'm going to ask you this about. Are there people in your life that you would love to convert that have not been converted yet? All of us can think of those people. The next question is, and don't let this hit you wrong, have you tried? And if not, why not? And this isn't accusatory. We're going to look at some reasons why we don't try to evangelize some of the folks that are close to us in our lives. So sometimes it could be, let's say it's Matthew 5 and 10, sometimes it could be intimidating. So what we want to look at here, we want to look at Mark. We'll look at Mark 6, 1 through 4. This should make us feel a little bit better about being nervous or having a little bit of difficulty studying with those around us. Mark 6, 1 through 4, it says, Then he went out. It's talking about Jesus here. Then he went out, and there came to him his own country, and his own disciples followed him. And when the Sabbath had come, he began to teach in the synagogue, and many hearing him were astonished, saying, Where did this man get these things? And what wisdom is this which is given to him, that such mighty works are performed by his hands? Is this not the carpenter, the son of Mary, the brother of James, Joseph, Jonas, and Simon? And are not his sisters here with us? So they were offended at him. When we start reading this, all of you have heard these verses read before, but it's hard to apply those to ourselves. People that are closest to us a lot of times aren't going to look at us in a way that they'll be able to listen to us. And then Jesus goes on to say, he said, But Jesus said to them, A prophet is not without honor except in his own country and among his own relatives and in his own house. And now he could do no mighty work there except that he laid his hands on a few sick people and healed them. And he marveled because of their unbelief, and he went about from villages and circuit teaching them. If Jesus can't teach the people that need him best, then we shouldn't just say, well, I can't teach those people, I'm not going to try. But we shouldn't be, I guess, astonished when it happens that people that we're around on a regular basis maybe don't listen to us or don't want to hear us. It's not an unusual thing, so don't be too hard on yourself. And I'm not saying don't try. It's just that Jesus experienced the very same thing whenever he was trying to teach people. It's not just us, so it's bound to happen to us. So whenever you try to study with them and you mention it and you offer and they don't really seem interested or you don't get anywhere with them, don't get too bound up on those one individuals. Let's look at some more things that he said here in Matthew 10. He gave them power, and he tells them to perform miracles, which will confirm the word as they teach. But whenever they perform these miracles, it's also going to benefit the individuals that perform the miracles on. So whenever he performs those miracles, he also goes on and he tells them further, he said not to accept money for healing from these people. Why would he tell them not to accept money for that?
That they showed the disciples that was supposed to be a depiction of this, they had a woman in the middle of it. And there's no offense to the ladies, I mean, they can do good stuff too, but they weren't in that group, and they were always depicted in that. And I spent about 30 minutes trying to find a picture, and I thought, I got to move on. So I found this, and this would have been the typical dress that people would have put on to travel back then. And we're going to read about what he tells to take with them or not take with them. He says, provide neither gold nor money or silver or copper or your money belts. They weren't supposed to take money with them. And he said, now whatever city or town you enter into, inquire who is worthy of his food, or inquire who is worthy, let your peace return to you, and whoever will not receive you nor hear your words when you depart that house, shake off the dust of your feet. So I got down a little bit below. This thing jumping around messed me up, so let's get on the right one. Okay, here it is, verse 10. That's what I was looking for. Now in their bag, you're not supposed to take no copper or anything in your money belts, nor bag for your journey, not 2 tunics, nor sandals, nor staffs, for a worker is worthy of his food. Now when he talks about a bag here, the bag that you see depicted here would have been a typical bag they would carry. It was often called a haversack or a shepherd's bag, and they would size these bags so they could take about a day's worth of provisions with them, that they could replenish that when they stopped for the night. And it was always made of animal skin. And that's another thing I found in the pictures that I found. It was all sewn out of fabric with some kind of interesting colors and stuff, more like we would see today. So it was always made out of some type of skin. And when it talks about a tunic, do y'all know what a tunic is? Which one of these are a tunic? Is it his outer part or his inner part that he's wearing?
The outer.
Well, actually it was the inner part. And that's okay, because I thought that too until I studied this, and I got to thinking, which part is the tunic? I always assumed it was the outer part. The outer part is called the mantle or the cloak. The tunic is actually the inner part, and that's the reason I asked this question. So don't feel bad you got it wrong. I didn't know this either until I read it the other day. It was a short sleeve, typically, not long sleeve. It would come down to at least the knees and sometimes lower, like this guy's is here. So when he says not to take 2 of them, it starts to make sense, because he only needs 1 of each, because the inner one would be something that he would wear against himself. So why do you think it said not to take anything extra with him? When he goes on here and he talks about, he says don't take 2 tunics, but then he says nor sandals or staffs. Were they supposed to go barefoot? Where he says not sandals or a staff, were they supposed to go barefoot and no staff? Is that what it means? So I think what he's really saying here, he says don't take 2 tunics, but also don't take 2 of the undergarment and don't take 2 of the staff.
They were supposed to rely on the gifts from those that they were giving the word to. That's Oriental custom over there in that part of the world. If you were giving a message and they were responsive to it, you'd accept their gifts, and that was part of it.
Yeah. So what they were supposed to do is they were supposed to trust in God to provide for them. That was the whole concept of them not taking extra stuff with them. They weren't supposed to pack heavy. It wasn't a burden that they were supposed to carry. They were supposed to trust on God through other people to provide these things for them. And another thing to make mention, he's got a crook on this here. This was a staff. If it didn't have the crook on it, it would be a rod. And we hear about rods in other part of the Bible, how Moses struck the rock and all that. If it didn't have a crook on the end, then it was a rod. A staff would have the crook. And we call that sometimes the shepherd's hook, because shepherds had these. So I'm going to skip out and leave out a few things so I know that we can get through. So I guess the point of this, or why I wanted to bring that up, is we should realize that we try to teach people around us. When we try to teach those around us, it's not all on us to make all this work. Just like when he sent them out on this limited commission and they had to take their supplies with them initially, they weren't going to take a lot of extra stuff. They were going to rely on the people that they come in contact with and God to provide that to them. We have to look around us and be resourceful of how to get the studies and how to teach people, but we can rely on God to work some of that out too. And it may be that He'll provide you the opportunity, or it may be the place to teach. You could bring them here to the building, or it may be that He blesses you with the income to have a meal or provide a meal that you can spend time with these folks to get to know them so that you might teach them. Or it could be that you have a congregation like ours here, that there's plenty of people here that can teach, that can do that. And if you're willing to bring them here, some of us will teach them. You don't have to always be the one to do the study. So God provides those things also. So skipping on down to the next one, well, one last thing about that, I guess, as He sends them out on this journey, part of what this journey on the limited commission was going to do is it was going to prepare them. It was the first time that they'd been sent out on a journey. They'd been with Jesus and been traveling with Jesus, but this was the first time as a group that they were going to be sent on this journey. And they had what was the easier targets in the Jews, so to speak, and they weren't necessarily a really easy target, but they were easier than the Gentiles and the Samaritans. But as they go out on this journey is going to prepare them for the bigger journey that was eventually coming when He gave them the Great Commission, so that they would start then in Jerusalem and Samaria and all the outer regions, and they would have to teach everyone, which was going to prove to take a lot longer, was going to prove to be more problematic or more difficult. So it was going to prepare them, just like with us, if we pick the easier people first and we study with them first, if we get people to team teach or help us, like Don and I do, it works well. If you do that, then it prepares you a little at a time, and the more you do it, you'll get more prepared and more prepared as you go for the more difficult ones. And then you can circle back to those that are closer to you, that are harder to teach. Now when he goes on and he says, in verse 11, now whatever city or town you enter, inquire who in it is worthy, and stay there till you go out. And I'll read through this and then we'll go back and pick it apart a little bit. Verse 12 says, and when you go into the household, greet it. If the household is worthy, let your peace come upon it, but it is not worthy, let your peace return to you. And whoever will not receive you, nor hear your words, when you depart from that house or city, shake off the dust of your feet. And assuredly I say to you, it will be more tolerable in the land of Sodom and Gomorrah in the day of judgment than for that city. All right. Shaking off the dust of your feet. He gave them some specific instructions, but before we get to this one, he talked about inquire who is worthy to stay at. What did he mean by that? What's he saying? Pick out a household that's worthy for you to stay at.
One that is acceptable to their words. They're hearing their words and they're listening to what they have to say. They're gaining knowledge of what's being said.
Yeah, they're interested in the message. They're open to it, and they want to learn. They want to hear it. Maybe somebody that they teach initially, and then they get to go and stay in the household with them. So it would be somebody that would be acceptable for that. If you think about seeking out a family to do that, and you pick somebody that's receptive to the message, it's going to be a lot easier to stay there. Not only is it easier for you to stay there, they're going to be more accommodating for you. They're going to help you in your journey. They're going to help you spread the message a little more than what they would be if they were not in favor of it.
I also think it's interesting too, it says that you find that house that's worthy and you stay there, but then it goes after, it's like, but if you find out that they're not really worthy, that means they weren't necessarily the ones making the decision whether or not it was worthy. It seems that they had to rely on other people around them to let them know, hey, this is a place that you can go and stay at.
Yeah,
so
that's
rely on other Christians who may have been in the area, or the Jews.
That's right. And it talks about as you enter, pronounce a blessing on the household, but it talks about if you don't stay there, you can't stay there, then don't leave that blessing there. The Bible doesn't really go into a lot of detail to explain to us what that was, but a lot of people think that they would pray over that household and they would ask for a blessing on that household as they stayed there, but if they weren't going to get to stay there and they weren't going to promote the word or help them spread the news about the kingdom, then they wouldn't receive that blessing, which starts to make sense. And then it says, till you go out. What does the till you go out mean? So I think it means stay at one household each time you enter a city, each time you enter a town. When you enter a place, set up in one household. Don't waste time repeating that process in the same city. Pick one household, stay there. Stay with this good family that's going to help you, that's going to promote everything and help this be an easier process. Don't waste time moving around between the households. And it says, let your peace come upon it. Whoever will not receive your words or hear your words when you depart from that house or city, shake the dust off your feet. So it was hard to find a picture of this that was really worthwhile either. And he's not shaking the dust off, but you can see some dusty feet there as he's traveling whenever he's going along. And it says, shake the dust off your feet. This is a very deep-rooted, shaking the dust off your feet is a very deep-rooted thing that was in the Jewish culture. This is a map on the right here. If you can see this, you can see Samaria in the middle. That's highlighted, and that's where the Samaritans would live. Oftentimes, whenever the Jews was trying to travel from Jerusalem or Ephraim down in the Judean area, see the little dotted line that goes around the right? That meets the little area up there? A lot of time they would go on the opposite side of the bank of Jordan, and they would travel out of the way to not have to go through Samaria because they didn't want to get the dust on their feet when they traveled through Samaria. They thought if they got the dust on their feet, that the Samaritans were such heathens that if they got the dust on their feet as they traveled back into their own land, they didn't even want to get the dust off of the land that the Samaritans occupied in their own homeland, that they didn't want to defile their own homeland. So it was a tradition that they would go often way out around this. And you can see right there in the middle is Jacob's Well. Jacob's Well would have been a great spot to get water as you were traveling. You could see the distance is much shorter to go up through into Galilee or Tyre if they just went straight, but they often wouldn't do it because they hated the idea so badly of traveling through that and having this dust on their feet. So when he's talking about shake the dust off your feet, that's where that comes from. It's so ingrained in the Jewish culture that if somebody shakes the dust off their feet, they're trying to shake off any possibility of any kind of defilement or unholiness that they could have gotten on them at the moment that they traveled through this land. So much so that they would go way out around to not even have to cross through there. So when they're given this commandment to shake the dust off their feet, can you imagine? Can you imagine as a Jewish person, you have another Jew come up to you and they walk up and they want to talk to you about something and you don't hear what they've got to say, and then they go shaking the dust off their feet? And then you realize they're shaking the dust off their feet at me, or they're doing that toward my town. You know, who these Jews think they are? They're a Jew too, and now they're saying this thing that don't sound right, and now they're shaking the dust off their feet at me. That would have been hard to digest. It would have been like they're trying to put me on the level of the Samaritans or the Gentiles. I'm a Jew, you know, and they're doing this to me. So that should have woken them up or got their attention. It should have been a shock to them whenever they saw that. So the Samaritans, it's important to know who the Samaritans are. And one last thing I wanted to mention too is just a side note. We know the River Jordan was not a clean river. We know that from Naaman, where he was told in 2 Kings 5, and we won't go to read that he was supposed to go dip in the Jordan, and it was a dirty river. So they're crossing a dirty river and doing all this extra effort to try to avoid the Samaritans. So the Samaritans, who were they? What do you know about the Samaritans?
Part of the 10 tribes of Israel that separated from the two. They were different. They worshiped different gods in different places. They, part of Jeroboam split, Rehoboam and Jeroboam. You said they're heathens. They worship the golden calf.
Let's go look at 2 Kings 17.
They completely changed their religion. Jeroboam did. The time, the place, the worship.
So I used to think, yes, I used to think that they were just heathens like the Gentiles, but I didn't know why they separated their name out because I hadn't studied that part before. So I used to think that. So whenever I went back and looked, and we'll read through this kind of quickly, 2 Kings 17, we're going to read 24 through 36. And what's happening here is they're under Syrian captivity. The Syrians have captivity of them. They have rule over them. And starting in verse 24 of chapter 17 of 2 Kings, it says, "And the king of Assyria brought people from Babylon, Cuthra, Ava, Hamath, and from Shephaim, and placed them in the cities of Samaria instead of the children of Israel, and they took possession of Samaria and dwelt in these cities." So the king forcibly put people from other nationalities in the Samaritan city. And we'll find out as we read on, he also took some Samaritans out, or some of the Jewish people out, the Israelites out, and brought them to other places. And he said, and it was so, the beginning of their dwelling there, and that they did not fear the Lord. Therefore the Lord sent lions among them, which killed some of them. So they spoke to the king of Assyria, saying, "The nations whom you have removed and placed in the cities of Samaria do not know the rituals of the God of the land. Therefore he has sent lions among them, and indeed they are killing them because they do not know the rituals of the God of the land." So the king of Assyria has this idea. He says, okay, so he says, let me find my spot. And then the king of Assyria commanded, saying, "Send them one of the priests whom you brought from there, and let him go and dwell with them, and let him teach them the rituals of the God of the land. And without going on and reading the rest of it so we can move along, what winds up happening is it doesn't all the way stick. They go back and they try to teach them some of it, and just like Lonnie was saying, they worshiped in a different way. They hung on to their heathen gods because they were out of another country. They hung on to the idols and the gods and stuff they have, and they mixed it with what they were supposed to be worshiping at as an Israelite. So that's why the Jews hated them so bad. And not only that, but like was also said, they were considered half-breeds because the people of the land that was brought into them wound up intermingling and marrying and mixing with them. So then they started having children that were other nationalities as well as mixed with the Israelites. And they thought the lineage of God was supposed to come through this, so they messed up that lineage in the rest of the Israelites' eyes. So when you get down to modern day, and the Jews just hated them because of that. So can you imagine being a Jew and having the task of teaching a Samaritan? Knowing everything that you know now about the intermixing and the difference in beliefs and religion, can you imagine having to go teach a Samaritan? That would be an uphill task. It would be a lot like if we had a congregation of brethren that had went way off course, very liberal, doing things that's way beyond what the Bible says, and you were going to have to walk in over there and try to teach them. Can you imagine that task? It would take a very strong individual to be able to do that. So that's part of why he's saying don't go to the Samaritans first, don't go to the Gentiles first, go to the Jews. So here's a little more information on the Samaritans. This is modern day Samaria. And part of the information we skipped over is whenever the Syrian king brought these priests in and tried to teach them, and they didn't get all the way back to where they should be. And of course, you had the destruction of the temple that the Israelites were worshiping in, and they wanted to rebuild the temple. When the Israelites started to rebuild the temple, the Samaritans said, hey, we'll come help. And the Jews said, thanks, but no thanks. You know, y'all are intermingled. We don't want you helping us. So there was great animosity developed then between the Samaritans and the Israelites, and they wouldn't let them build the temple. So the Samaritans said, okay, we'll go build our own temple. Well, there it is, on top of that hill. Even more animosity and division between them. And pushing the wrong button. So you see a little closer view here. In this closer view, it looks like there's more structures up next to that. But if you blow that picture up, this outcropping right up there, you can see the temple much better in that picture on the right. You can see it right there on the top. This outcropping of buildings is right up below that. You just can't see it from the far away picture there. So this is the modern day area that we're talking about that was considered Samaria. And this is today's Samaritans. This was in 2022, and they're making a pilgrimage up this mountain, and the name of the mountain is Gerizim. Gerizim, I don't really know how to pronounce that, but that is the modern day name of this mountain, and that's where they're going up. These are Samaritans that live there in present day in 2022, making the trek up this mountain to this temple they built, still trying to worship under the Samaritan beliefs. Now, Samaria is no longer recognized as Samaria, although the Samaritans still live there in this area and have their temple there. The region is on the west bank in Israel. I wouldn't recommend to visit today. And it has been under Jewish control since 1967. The area's boundaries have changed somewhat since the ancient boundaries were established, but it's still there in the same place, and it's still they're still going up this mountain to this temple and worshiping there. In 2022, the population was 874 Samaritans. Now, there's other Samaritans around in other parts of the country that have bigger populations, but as far as actual Samaritans that are from this lineage, 874 people in 2022, and they're still trying to worship there today. Sum it up. Don't be so busy with the ordinary that you forget the value of the message and the knowledge that you have. Don't forget the importance of the Great Commission we've been given from God to teach others. And don't get bogged down trying to teach people that do not value the knowledge or the message that you have to share with them. In your mind, shake the dust off your feet when you wore yourself out on somebody and they just won't hear you. Had to do that with my own parents. Tough, hard. And it drove me to it because I had to get my say. And when I had my say, they rejected it. And that's just where we're at. I hate it. I wish it wasn't that way. I'd love to change it. I can't. And it's really going to hurt me whenever they pass. But it's not on me. I shook the dust off my feet. I'd done what I could. And if they would hear me, I'd still teach them. Mom can't hear it. Dad don't want to. So I'm saying that not to act like, well, I've done this, you can. That's not what I mean. It's hard. It ain't easy. It took me years. But here's what I'm saying. You're seeing this Bible studies that Don and I are doing. We found a niche here, and it's working with how we team teach people. And it works Find your niche. Find how to teach people. I went for years, and I didn't teach anybody. Why? Because I got frustrated. Nobody wanted to hear it. I couldn't convert anybody. It's just like I was wasting my time, so I got busy with life, and I did the ordinary, and I forgot about the extraordinary. It's not something I'm proud of now, but I did it, and we all do things that we do. Don't do that, especially if you're a young person. Don't fall into those spots. Find somebody to teach and teach them. You'll have some failures. You'll have some people that will turn back. You're seeing us have it. Jesus had it. We know that. So I'm over 2 minutes, but thank you for listening, and hope you got something out of this. And I'm trying to encourage you to evangelize. There's no better feeling than to be sitting across the table and see the light bulb come on and somebody say, I got to get in that water. And you need to help me. So have that feeling and teach them. So have a good afternoon. See you back tonight.